All right, Dana. Thank you so much. Dana O'Gorman at Dana OG on Twitter. I love that. OG. That's
Well, I know everyone always says, "Why do you call yourself an OG?" I'm like, I don't call myself an OG. It's my last name.
that's my name.
I know, right? Seriously.
Why would she call herself Original Gangsta?
Yeah.
She
Nope.
doesn't look very gangsta.
Oh, you don't know. I can get there if I need to. No.
Announcing a contest. The Donut Bag podcast is giving away an Antonio Brown bobblehead from the folks at Foco.com. The winner of my Yahoo Pro Football Pick'em group will get an Antonio Brown bobblehead. It's Antonio Brown on a helicopter from that time, from when he came in the training camp, because, he's really understated. To enter, you have to make sure you subscribe to the podcast in one of the various places you can subscribe. And you have to go to football.fantasysports.yahoo.com/pick'em, and the group number is 65296. The password is donuts, all lowercase, and make sure you do that soon. And the winner of that playoff pick'em group gets it. This is brought to you by Foco.com. Real fans need the best gear, and that's why we make legendary gear for the most legendary fans. That's at Foco USA on Twitter and Foco.com, Foco.com. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Donut Bag, part of the Pulse Podcast Network and the PodHub Network. In this episode, I preview the NFC wildcard games with folks from three of the teams playing this weekend. For the Seahawks, I talked to Dana O'Gorman from OurTurfFootball.com. For the Eagles, I talked to Matt Greeley from the 4th and 26 podcast. And for the Bears, I talked to Wanda Weidman of OurTurfFootball.com and the For the Fan Podcast Network. The Donut Bag starts right now. All right, it's Wild Card Weekend, and the Seahawks face the Cowboys. With me to talk about it is Dana O'Gorman. She's at Dana OG, Senior Sports Director for Our Turf Football and host of Our Turf Podcast. Dana, how are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me on.
We were talking before this about how it was kind of expected for the Steelers to make it to the playoffs, but they didn't. And not sure that the Seahawks were expected to make it, but they did. What happened? How did they get to this point?
It really truly is one word, and it's unfortunate for the team, but it's good for us. They were completely underestimated. That's all it was. And they like to throw that word around a lot, for teams who kind of burst out of nowhere. And Seattle didn't completely come out of nowhere. Yes, there was a lot of the changing of the guard at the beginning of the season with a lot of the old, defensive players leaving, these crazy good young guys coming in, which we all know Pete Carroll loves a really young team. But you have Russell Wilson, you have Bobby Wagner, you have KJ Wright, you have those veterans that kind of held it down. And they told us, I can't even tell you how many press conferences where Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner, Pete Carroll, all of them were telling us, you guys aren't giving us enough credit. We're going to surprise everyone. And sure enough, it's exactly what they did.
It's amazing. It's amazing that they replenished so fast, because that was what people were saying at the beginning of the year. It's like, oh, they lost all these people. There's no way they're going to be good. They're going to tank. And then, hey, that's you got to give credit. Getting replenishing so quickly. That's great.
It's interesting. I think where credit is due, this goes to Pete Carroll's system. And as much as Richard Sherman is salty, and I love Richard Sherman to death, but as salty as he is that he is not on this team anymore, his prediction that this team was falling apart had no merit. And the reason why it didn't fall apart, when you lose that many, quote unquote superstars, it was the Legion of Boom all at once, is because the system in place is so sound. And that really truly comes to the credit of Pete Carroll and what he has done up there in Seattle. and consistently year after year taught and coached these young men up to be able to replace the guys as they need to be replaced.
It's perfect. It's a great system, great organization. That's amazing. Now, the the Seahawks and Cowboys played in week 3, but you could almost throw that result out the window because I think both teams changed so much since then.
It's very true. So the Seahawks did play the Cowboys. They played them in Seattle, though. That's obviously one big change. Seahawks won 24-13. The interesting thing there is that was really at the beginning of the season. And if you've ever paid attention to the Seahawks, or if you're a Seahawks fan, since Russell Wilson came on board, it takes him a couple games. It takes him a minute. He's got to kind of work his way into the season, and we always start really slow. We as fans and as writers and as reporters have learned that we cannot overreact to that because that's just how it works. But, this was really the game that people saw the light bulb. It's like, there it is. We knew it was coming. But you're right. This team is completely different now, as it was back then. And I think very much for the better.
I usually have Russell Wilson on my fantasy football teams, and it's so maddening. He always starts out slow, and then they finish so strong every year. It's amazing. I remember on my podcast, anytime we would talk about Seattle, it's like, oh, here comes the Seattle late season surge here. Yep. Here it comes, like, get ready. Like, every year it happens. And it's like, as the season goes on, they just get stronger and stronger. And it's almost look like this year, too.
It absolutely was. And that a lot of it has to do. Now, this year, I wasn't surprised as other years because we have a new offensive coordinator and Brian Schottenheimer. And so I thought it might take them a while. That again, was one of the reasons why no one really expected them to go to the playoffs. There were people out there saying they weren't even going to win 4 or 5 games because they were going to have a completely new system, a completely new defense, which then people didn't realize Ken Norton Jr. was already, had already worked for Pete Carroll before anyway, and all these new coordinators and everything. And so they thought it was going to be slow. So when they started out slow, it's like, okay, you could watch the film and really see, missed routes, missed tackles. Oh, he didn't read that right. And you could see that there was a new system coming into play. But then as they got more comfortable with it, and then that run game, which has been so important to Seattle for so long, really started to take off. And Chris Carson and Mike Davis really started to kind of show who they were, and that fans could kind of trust, and the team could trust, and Russell Wilson could trust. They just started to roll. They don't call Russell Wilson Mr. December for nothing, because that is what he does. December, he is amazing in. And where other quarterbacks start to tire, or maybe, start to get injured, they're a little more beat up, it seems to be the opposite for Wilson, and it has been since he's been in the league.
Yeah. And the other thing about this matchup is they're very similar. They both, rely on the run game. They're both quarterbacks are kind of similar. It's almost like a mirror image game.
Kind of. There's definitely some differences. I feel for Dak because Seattle had such a bad O-line for so long, and I think he kind of felt the repercussions of having not a great O-line after years of Dallas having the best in the league for a long time. But you're right. They're strong run game. They have, now Dallas does have Amari Cooper now, which has been a huge help to Dak Prescott, and I think that's going to be a big addition. But, Seattle, on the other hand, the same thing. They have those, wide receivers, but really they rely on the run game. But the difference is Seattle's run defense, I think, is a little stronger, if I remember last time I looked, than Dallas. I think that this is going to be a fun game. And I've seen that a lot and heard it a lot on NFL radio and on the television, that this is going to be one of the more competitive games of the week. And because of how similar they are, I don't think Dak is quite to Russell Wilson's level, but they definitely have so many other similarities.
Yeah. But one big difference is playoff experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I was just talking to a Philadelphia person about the Eagles and Bears, and you have a team that went to the Super Bowl last year against a team that's hasn't been in the playoffs for a while. It's like I wonder how much playoff experience has to do with success. I don't know, but I'm thinking that has to be an edge.
It has to be an edge, especially in the quarterback position. I think, Seattle has a very young team. They have a very young secondary, and, just much as Dallas has a lot of young teams. But where the difference is the calm nature and the leadership that we have on offense and defense. So you have Russell Wilson there. He's not going to let the bright lights shake him. I mean, if he didn't in a Super Bowl, he's not going to do it in a wild card game in Jerry World. And then you have Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright, who's finally back. Everyone talks about Bobby Wagner, but when you have Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright together, they are an immovable force. And KJ was hurt for the majority of the season, and he is back now. And I think with that experience on the defensive side, the offensive, experience with Russell Wilson, with Doug Baldwin, even Tyler Lockett, I think that calming presence will not let it get too big for them. And it is just a wild card game. We're not talking about the Super Bowl, but to Dallas, this wild card game is so important because they've struggled so much in those playoff games. Where
the pressure has to be on.
Yeah. Seattle's undefeated in the card. So
yeah, the pressure has to be on the Cowboys. I mean, they're known for playoff failures, and they're at home, so that might, instead of a home field advantage, it might actually be more pressure on them. So
it is a lot of pressure. I agree. And and the thing of it is that, once again, we said it at the beginning, but repeat it, that it's all gravy for Seattle at this point. They were never supposed to make it this far. Now, do I think the team thinks that way? No. But it does take some of that pressure off, that they have already exceeded expectations. Now, do they want it? Of course they do. They want it all. They want to win, and that's just how they're built. But I do think that lingering doubt, those question marks, and the newness of it for Dallas is going to add some pressure there. Do I still think it's going to be a great game? Absolutely. But I think you're right. If you have to give an edge there, it would definitely have to go to Seattle.
It's going to be so interesting. It's just, they're just such close matchups and so similar. It's just going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. So
really what it's going to come down to is the run game. Who can control the run game and who can control the clock? And that's what it's going to come down to. Does Zeke Elliott, take over and have some big runs? Or is it that, grind and, run and the two-prong running of Chris Carson and Mike Davis, that Seattle will control the clock? They're very good at that. But if Dallas can do the same thing, it could come down to who has the ball last. Now, if I have to bet, and I am a Seahawks fan, but even if I had to bet, if you had to take Russell Wilson over Dak Prescott in a two-minute drill, I'm taking Russell Wilson.
Yeah. It's going to be really good. So.
It's going to be fun.
All right, Dana. Thank you so much. Dana O'Gorman at Dana OG on Twitter. I love that. OG. That's
well. I know everyone always says, why do you call yourself an OG? I'm like, I don't call myself an OG. It's my last name.
That's my name.
I know. Right. Seriously.
Why would she call herself Original Gangster? She doesn't look very gangster.
Oh, you don't know. I can get there if I need to. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much.
You bet. Have a great night.
Eagles face the Bears in Wild Card Weekend. With me to talk about it is Matt from the 4th and 26 podcast. Matt, how you doing?
Hey, Joe, I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, we're hanging in here in Pittsburgh. We have our own. We're dreaming about the playoffs here. Must be nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, my condolences to the Steelers fans. We're elated here in Philly. We're kind of shocked, to be honest. I think, if most of us are honest with ourselves, we're a little surprised that they won out. Went 3-0 against the Rams, Houston, and the Redskins, and find ourselves in the playoffs. Like, we were hoping, but
Yeah, and you needed help. I thought it kind of looked like Minnesota was going to get in, and uh, yeah, I mean, you talk about finishing hot. It what happened this year? It kind of looked like